What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Friday, January 27th, 2023, and I want to share with you this map that I made showing what I believe to be Russia's next big move into Ukraine. And this map shows Russia's axes of advance in the next phase of the war, which is going to start any day or any week now. Russia's going to make another big push into Ukraine. And a lot of Western analysts don't believe that Russia would go after Western Ukraine, but I believe that Russia is going to go after Western Ukraine. And I also believe that they're going to try to make a land corridor from Transnistria to the Black Sea, okay? Because Transnistria right now is landlocked. It's surrounded by Ukraine and Moldova. So Russia wants to connect Transnistria to the Black Sea so this way they can reinforce it and put Russian troops there and move equipment into Transnistria and reinforce it. But really, what concerns me the most is a big push from Belarus into Western Ukraine. And I have this map posted to my Twitter account. If you want to look back in the future after you watch this video, if you want to reference this map, it's on my Twitter. It's pinned to my Twitter. And my Twitter handle is at NYPrepper1. Okay. So when you get into my Twitter account, I have it pinned to the top of the message feed. Okay. So if you want to reference it at some point in the future, that's where it's going to be. So let me just show you where I believe Russia is going to make two big moves this time around. They didn't really go after Odessa much in the first phase of the war, and they didn't really go after Western Ukraine in the first phase of the war. But I think that's where they're going to strike this year. And I'm going to start with the most simple avenue of approach, and that's down here, just southwest of Odessa, on the other side of the Dniester Bay. Okay, and that's this big bay right here. So what I think Russia's going to do is they're going to make an amphibious landing right down in here. Okay, and they're going to stay on the opposite side of the Dniester Bay from Odessa. Okay, they're going to use this bay as a natural barrier to any Ukrainian troops that might be stationed in this area near Odessa. They're not going to go after Odessa, and the reason why is Odessa itself and the immediate surrounding areas are heavily fortified, especially the beaches here. There's mines, there's anti-tank obstacles. So this area is a no-go for any kind of amphibious landing or even any kind of land invasion of Odessa would be extremely costly for the Russians. So I think they're going to try to avoid this whole area, and they're going to instead focus on this little piece of Ukraine right here. Okay, this little chunk of Ukraine that borders Romania and Moldova is extremely lightly defended. There's not a lot of Ukrainian troops here. Okay, so they could come right in from the Black Sea. A few weeks ago, it was reported that the largest amphibious landing ship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet took off from Novorossiysk and went out into the Black Sea. Okay, so that's really suspicious. That was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that's the largest amphibious landing ship that they have in the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And so, what I think they could do is basically land right over here somewhere. It doesn't have to be exactly right here, but let's say in Serhivka, this little town here, maybe land in Serhivka or Kurotny. It doesn't have to be exactly in this area. It could be somewhere down in here. But basically, what they're going to try to do is stay on the opposite side of this big bay over here, this Dniester Bay from Odessa, and use this as a natural barrier. So if the Ukrainians want to come from the Odessa direction and try to push them out, it's going to be hard for the Ukrainians because they have this big bay that they're going to have to cross. And also, it's going to be harder for artillery to reach the Russians here. So it's a big natural barrier. And then as soon as they land over here, there's not going to be much in the way for them to get to Transnistria. It's a very short distance from Transnistria to the Black Sea. So we're looking at 50 kilometers, okay? 50 kilometers, and let's change that to miles for my viewers in the US. So we're going to be looking at around 33 miles from the Black Sea to Transnistria in a straight line. That's not a long distance at all. And this area is very lightly defended. They could come in, make some landings here, and secure a corridor to Transnistria. And once they have that corridor, they can resupply Transnistria, fortify it. They could move Russian troops in there, and eventually in the future they could threaten other parts of Ukraine from Transnistria, and they could also threaten Moldova itself if they can have a connection to the Black Sea to Transnistria. They can just keep funneling in weapons and troops into Transnistria, build it up, and then they can make a push into central Ukraine or other parts of southern Ukraine, or they could go after Moldova. Okay, so that's one major axis of advance that I'm really concerned about, an amphibious landing in southwestern Ukraine close to Transnistria. And here's the big one, okay? And this is an attack from Belarus. And we know that the Russians have been building up their forces just south of Brest. There's a small base over here, and they've been funneling in troops and equipment in this area. There's also the Lunanets base over here, where there's a lot of aviation. There's a ton of bases in Belarus close to Ukraine, and there's been a lot of troops and aviation moved into this southwestern part of Belarus. Okay, and there's been some intelligence that suggests that Belarus and Russia would try to cross the border into the Volyn Oblast, and they're going to try to seize the towns of Kovel and Sarne. Okay, these are very small cities or large towns. They would have to cross through these forests and wetlands here and seize Kovel and Sarne. And there are some roads here that are actually dry that they could move tanks and heavy armor through these roads, but there's not a lot of roads because there's a lot of forest land here. There's a national park here. So there's only a few roads that connect these towns to Belarus. So they would definitely be choke points, and the Ukrainians could launch ambushes from the forest. But as you see, there's one road right here that goes directly into Kovel. Okay, this highway right here, the E85 highway, goes right into Belarus. All right, it's a straight shot from this base here. Actually, this base is right over here, a polygon, and they could just follow the E85 highway down into Kovel. Okay, and then same thing over here. There's a highway that goes right to Sarne. Okay, this road right here. Okay, this road from the town of Stolen, goes right into Sarne. And then the rumors are that once they get Sarne and Kovel, they can reinforce, regroup, and then make a push for Lutsk and Rivne. And Lutsk and Rivne are regional cities. They're pretty large. They're not massive cities, but they're a good size. And once they get Lutsk and Rivne, then they could threaten Lviv, they could threaten Ternopil, and they can threaten Khmelnytsky. Now, these three cities here are actually very important for a variety of reasons. Lviv, known as the safe haven city of Ukraine, this is where a lot of Western fighters come in to link up with Ukrainian units and forward deploy. Lviv is also where a lot of Western journalists are, a lot of Western intelligence agencies. So what they could do is once they take Lutsk and Rivne, they could have one axis going to Lviv And even if they don't try to capture Lviv, if they could even just get within artillery range to threaten Lviv, okay, and bombard Lviv with artillery like they did with Kharkiv, that would force the Ukrainians to move a lot of their troops from the eastern front all the way out here to protect Lviv. Now, one really dangerous thing about this is that look how close this is to Poland. Okay, Lviv is actually a Polish city. It was built by Polish kings, and it's possible that Poland could send some of their troops in to protect Lviv and push the Russians out of this area. This whole area used to be Polish territory for hundreds of years, and the Polish government would not be happy if there were Russian troops right on their doorstep, because right now Ukraine is a buffer between Russia. But if Russia's right on Poland's doorstep, they're not going to be happy about that. So I would not be surprised if Poland were to send in troops, either conventional troops or some kind of mercenaries or covert troops, to force the Russians out. Okay, but once they get Lutsk and Rivne, the key is that they capture Lutsk and Rivne. That's the key, and then they can go after these other objectives, which would be Lviv would be one. I don't think Lviv would be a primary objective. I think that would be a secondary or even a tertiary objective, because they know that Lviv would possibly trigger Poland to get involved, and there's also a lot of foreign fighters here. So eventually they would try to push out the Russians here. So this would be more of like a bonus for the Russians. But I think what they would do is try to basically cut off the flow of Western weapons by basically pushing south from Lutsk and Rivne all the way to Transnistria, and basically connect Transnistria to Belarus, okay, and basically degrade the ability of the West to send weapons to Ukraine, where the front lines are in the eastern part of the country, okay. So, I think they would try to go after Ternopil. They might not try to enter the city, but just get within artillery range and start bombing it like they did with Kharkiv and Mariupol. Um, Ternopil has a lot of foreign fighters, a lot of Western intelligence there. It's a hub for foreign fighters that are entering into Ukraine, just like Lviv. So very critical for the flow of Western weapons and Western fighters and Western intelligence into Ukraine. So they would definitely try to threaten Ternopil somehow. I don't think they would try to enter the city, at least not initially. And then also here you have Khmelnytsky, which is important because there's a nuclear power plant here. Okay, it's one of the largest nuclear power plants in Western Ukraine. So they would definitely try to seize that power plant, just like they did with the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And then from there, they would basically just push south and try to connect to Transnistria here. And they would eventually meet the troops that came in from the Black Sea from the southern side of Transnistria. They would try to meet together in Transnistria, okay? And then they can reinforce this area here and then even threaten Moldova. They can try to take Moldova once they have enough troops in Transnistria that they can bring in from the Black Sea and from the Belarus direction. They can even threaten Moldova, and then they could even push into Odessa. But that's assuming that this massive axis of advance can hold. There's going to be a really long front line here that Ukraine can attack from either side. Poland could possibly get involved. So it would be a risky move by the Russians, but I think it's very plausible for them. And, they've been moving tons and tons of troops for the last few weeks. And they've been moving tons and tons of troops into this area for a reason, guys. Okay. Also, NATO AWACS planes have been flying loops over here right near the tri-border of Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. They've been flying in this area here just to the east of Lublin, just flying loops almost every day with AWACS planes. So they wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't something in this area that they were concerned about. And Again, there were rumors and some intelligence that suggested that this is what Russia was planning to do. They were going to try to go after Kovel, Sadne. Once they get those, then go to Lutsk and Rivne, and then from there try to connect to Transnistria. But even if they don't push all the way down to Transnistria, even if they seize control of Lutsk and Rivne, or even if they get within artillery range of Lutsk and Rivne, let's say they start pushing south, they seize Kovel, they seize Sarne, and then the Ukrainians divert their forces from the east, and they start fighting for Lutsk and Rivne, and they keep the Russians out of Lutsk and Rivne. Even then, it's still gonna, threaten the Western Ukrainian safe haven. Okay, and it's gonna really kind of shock the West and possibly make the West rethink where they would move their equipment into Ukraine from. Okay, but even if they don't seize Lutsk and Rivne, if they just go into this part of Ukraine, it's going to force the Ukrainians to move some of their forces from eastern Ukraine to protect this area, so they don't take Lutsk and Rivne, and then eventually Lviv, Ternopil, Khmelnytsky, and then eventually Moldova and Transnistria. Okay, so it's definitely very ambitious, but I think it's in the works, guys. Okay, I think this is going to happen possibly, and I think this is really plausible. This axis of advance right here is very doable for Russia because this area is lightly defended, and even Western Ukraine is extremely lightly defended. There's only like 20,000 Ukrainian troops in this area here. Okay, so it's very lightly defended. There's not a lot of heavy equipment here, like artillery and tanks and stuff like that. It's mostly Ukrainian territorial defense forces here, and Ukrainian territorial defense forces. They don't have a lot of the heavy armor. They don't have the HIMARS. They don't have a lot of tanks, artillery like they do in the eastern part of Ukraine and the southern part. So this is very likely, guys, and this would be like a worst case scenario, not only for Ukraine but for NATO, because it would be right next to Poland, right next to NATO countries. You have Romania, Slovakia over here, so the fighting would be right on NATO's doorstep, and the chances of escalation would be very high. Okay, so just wanted to share this with you guys. I think this is very possible. I'm not saying it's going to definitely happen this way. It might not, but there's definitely a lot of Russian troops here in southwestern Belarus. And there was some leaked information that there was a plan to take Kovel and Sarne and then push to Lutsk and Rivne, and then from Lutsk and Rivne to try to go to Lviv and then Transnistria. Okay, and then try to take Ternopil and Khmelnytsky. These are all key cities here in Western Ukraine. Okay, Lviv and Ternopil, lots of foreign fighters there, lots of Western intelligence there. Of course, it's a hub for Western equipment. And so the goal of this would be to connect to Transnistria, but degrade the flow of Western weapons into Ukraine. That's what this would do. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to share this with you guys. I'll keep you updated. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, and persevere.